Night pressed low over the water. The skiff rocked with each cautious pull of the oars, a rhythm that found its way into Tyrion's bones and settled there as if the river itself were breathing. Lantern light from the city lay in shivered ladders across the black surface and broke into coins whenever the oars cut through. On the far bank, the mudflats shone faintly, slick as eel skin. Somewhere behind them, the city wall crouched, pregnant with watchfires and whispers. He kept his hood up and his face forward. I slid over him and passed him out of habit now, and habit was everything. The riverman was a knot of a man with a sack of a voice and hands striped with old rope burns. He had introduced himself as Toller, then said names didn't matter on the water after dark. He smelled of tar and apples gone soft. Every stroke of the oars was careful, almost apologetic, as though he feared waking something sprawled beneath the surface. The girl at the prow, his granddaughter or his daughter, or an orphan he'd collected without fuss, watched the current with a saucer's poise. She had a cord around her wrist tied to the skiff's bell. If any patrol boat came within reach, she would let the bell fall, and the sound would die in the river before a man with armor could turn his head. "Quiet enough?" Toller murmured, breath clouding above the mouth of his scarf. "They're too busy staring inward. Never seen a city try so hard not to notice itself." Tyrion said nothing. He kept his hands folded under the cloak, thumbs worrying at each other. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a crossbow, a bolt, a stunned expression. The first memory he had of his father's eyes was of their weight. The last was of how quickly that weight went out. A rat peered over the skiff's edge as if judging him for the thought. "Not long now," Toller said. "Take you as far as the salt marshes. No patrols there. They sink if they try. You have coin for the horse." "A mule," Tyrion said. His voice sounded different to him, remote and scabbed over. "A mule will place fewer demands upon my dignity." The girl glanced back at him and covered a smile with her scarf. The skiff bumped a half-submerged log and slewed, and Toller set his oar flat to steady them, small splashes like firefly wings. "North Road's a mess," Toller went on. "Always is after armies are done with it. You sure you don't want the other way? South is easier, richer, and everyone's too tired to count their purses." "I've had my share of rich men," Tyrion said, and surprised himself with the steadiness of it. "They're all quite similar when the wine runs out." Toller grunted his agreement, or maybe he just needed to fill his lungs again. The skiff nosed into a reed bed with a soft hiss. The girl let the rope slip through her fingers, the bell poised above the water like a thought. They floated there, hugged by reeds, until a patrol boat drifted by with oars muffled and a single oil cup burning at its stern. Shadows huddled in the patrol boat like tired birds. Tyrion counted 3 men. He tried not to count what his life had been measured in lately. When the patrol had gone, Toller pushed off with the oar and the skiff slid forward as if grateful to be allowed to act like a boat again. The river widened and grew quiet. He could taste salt now. "Whatever you left behind," Toller said softly, as if he could feel Tyrion's swallow move down his throat. "I hope the river keeps it. Rivers do that if you're kind to them." Tyrion thought of a girl's hair twisted in a strong hand, of a voice that could go from warm to wheedling to raw in the space of a heartbeat. He thought of a man's chamber that had never betrayed him, until it had. He thought of a gold lion with its throat clogged by the smallest thing he had ever done that mattered. The skiff's prow kissed mud. The girl hopped out and waded to a hummock and tied them off. Tyrion stood with care. Each joint in his legs reported to him as if he were an elderly steward being kept informed of petty matters. He had a bundle, cloaks, a hat, a narrow knife, a small purse. In the purse, hard coins that could cross borders without asking permission. 2 of those coins found their way to Toller's palm as if they had always belonged there. The old riverman weighed them with the ood sense of men who understand metal. "Best road's not a road," Toller said, nodding toward a smear of pale grass. "Follow the shepherd paths to the old ferry. Take that to a village called Salt Run. Then keep to the lane that smells of peat. Fewer eyes. When they ask you your name, say you've forgotten the first, but you answer to whatever the last man called you." "I've been called many things," Tyrion said. He put the purse away. Do you have a name to lend? Not mine, Toller said, offended, then softened. Bren Hill. There's always a Bren Hill you can point to if someone goes digging. Hills breed boys like the sea breeds salt. Bren Hill, Tyrion repeated, trying the weight of it. Thank you. Don't thank me, Toller said, already bending to the oars. Thanks are like oil on the water. Slick, pretty, gone the minute the wind shows interest. The girl gave Tyrion a look that carried, briefly, the warmth of a hearth he had never sat at. Then the skiff turned, and the river took them back, and Tyrion was alone with a smear of grass and a sky that had eaten most of the stars. He made his way through the reeds until the ground decided to be firm again. The mud tried for his boots, but he had long since learned how to walk as if he were a friend to treacherous things. In the black half-light he found the shepherd path, a suggestion more than a path, a conspiracy of flattened sedge and sheep turds, and followed it. The air had that low metallic smell he associated with winter thinking about it. Out on the flats, tiny birds slept with their heads tucked and did not bother to wake as he passed. A mule waited in a tumble-down cop. Yes, by the old ferry, just as Toller had said. A boy dozed with his back against a rotting post, mouth open, snoring with the cheap innocence of the young. Tyrion clicked his tongue. The boy came awake like a snapped string and got to his feet. He had 2 teeth beyond what he needed and the rest arranged like a small argument. You're late, the boy said, as if that meant anything at this hour. I'm short, Tyrion said. We have both disappointed each other. Coins made the conversation more agreeable. The mule was a she, dun-colored, with ears that could hear lies. She inspected Tyrion with the same dispassion he had come to admire in stones and judges. He patted her shoulder. I shall call you Porridge for your likely contributions to my life, he said, took her rope without ceremony, and fixed his bundle across her crooked back. The old ferry was a flat raft married to a frayed rope and a prayer. Tyrion led Porridge aboard and worked the pulley. The river here was calmer. It sighed to itself and pretended not to notice. The boy watched from the bank, yawning, his hands buried in his armpits for warmth. If he had any curiosity about the man with the hood and the odd-sized legs, he had done the arithmetic of risk and found silence profitable. On the far bank, he disembarked with all the dignity afforded by a mule, made camp under a wind-torn copse of poplars, and did not light a fire. He chewed a strip of dried beef, drank from a skin of river water, lay back with the bundle as pillow, and watched the gray from the east arrive all at once. He did not sleep. Sleep had become a house he could see but could not enter unless he was willing to go through a different door by accident. One that opened on a room with a golden hand on a table and a handmaiden's necklace coiled into a question he could not answer. At dawn the world gained colors the way a harp gains strings, caution first, then the bold ones. The shepherd path widened into a rutted lane. Salt marsh gave way to fields shaved by too many hungers and thereafter to country that could not decide between hedges and ditches. He passed through Salt Run without stopping. It was less a village than a shrug. A few low houses with smoke listing from their mouths, a shrine with a stone that may have once looked like something, 3 boys playing a game of stones with rules known only to them, and a woman with red hands beating a rug as if trying to make it confess. No one looked at him twice. Men like him existed in the periphery. People had grown very good at letting the periphery handle itself. By midday clouds had settled across the sky like sheep deciding upon exhaustion. The chill sharpened. Tyrion counted his breaths for a while, then counted Porridge's. The mule's ears pricked toward a sound he could not hear. When he saw the riders, he had enough time to think. Be any other man just for a moment. 3 of them, wearing piecemeal armor with the resigned pride of mercenaries who had lost track of who was paying them. Their sigils looked like children's guesses. The leader had a yellow scarf and a missing ring finger. He saw Tyrion and let his horse eat the distance with small deliberate bites. Good day to you, little man, the leader said, the smile ready in the corner of his mouth. I should like to retain it, Tyrion said. I've had a long acquaintance with poor days and would like to diversify. Laughter as predicted. The other 2 shifted in their saddles, trying to find the correct degree of menace. Tyrion gave them none of his attention except the attention that measured distances and angles, hoof prints and mud, the length of a sword and the shape of boredom. "What's your business?" Yellow Scarf asked. "You look like business should pay you to go away." "Word has it," Tyrion said, adjusting Porridge's pack as if this were very important work, "that the North has need of men who know the South, and the South has need of forgetting. I'm looking for the cheaper of those employments." "The North." The leader drew the words out as if they were meat on a bone he paid for. "Which North?" "The one with weather," Tyrion said. "Is there another kind?" "That depends who owns it," one of the others said. He had a mouth like a healed cut. "Freys say one thing, Boltons say another. Some say a man with a book of laws can own weather if he chains enough words together." Tyrion considered. Weather did not like chains. Weather liked to come in the doorway without knocking. "Either way," he said, "I imagine they don't mind mules." Yellow Scarf studied him for a moment. The habit of men like that was to leave a poor man with nothing so that he would not later be tempted to think he had been spared. Tyrion had found that a surprising number of such men liked to practice mercy in small things to persuade themselves they had not forgotten how it was done. He took off his glove and held up 3 fingers. "3 kinds of men walk north right now," he said. "Hungry ones, vengeful ones, stupid ones. And what am I?" Tyrion said lightly. He could taste iron in his mouth, a trick of memory. "We'll find out," the man said, but there was no edge on it now. He looked at Porridge's saddle and at Tyrion's boots. He looked at the sky, which had nothing to say. After a heartbeat, he clapped his tongue and his horse shifted sideways so that the lane was wider again. "Keep to the lanes with hedges. Wolves don't like 2 choices." "Neither do men with orders," Tyrion said. The leader laughed and rode on. One of his men turned to look back, and Tyrion gave him the expression he had cultivated in childhood. A polite invitation to underestimate him. When they were gone, he let out the breath he had been counting without knowing and patted Porridge's neck. The mule flicked an ear as if to say she had expected more from him. By the time he reached the inn at the crossroads, not the same inn it had once been, but a ramshackle cousin pretend. And gee at the family resemblance. The day had pulled its warmth into itself and let the chill run the place. The sign hung by one chain and trembled every time the door opened. The woman who kept it had arms as thick as rope and eyes that had seen everything twice and decided it was the same both times. She set a bowl of stew in front of him and did not inquire who he was. The stew contained a story about a chicken that had tried to be in 2 places at once and had ended less well than hoped. 2 men played at dice with bones, arguing under their breath as if volume would cost them a point. A bard by profession and a liar by inclination sat near the hearth, plucking at an instrument with more cracks than strings, and sang a lament about a river. Tyrion listened for rumors the way a man listens for weather under a door. Not to the words, which were bent to fit mouths, but to the ways the words ran together. He learned that the Freys had a new song everyone called them by and that their men bled out slow wherever they were found. That South was feasting while North was budgeting wood. That a certain lord with a flayed man for a flag had a son who would rather talk to dogs than men and sometimes confused the two. That the king, someone's king, liked hunting more now because the woods didn't talk back. That a lord on a cold island had sent his oaths north and his gold nowhere at all. That steel cost what bone used to. That the winter ravens had gone out from the White City and come back with answers no one liked. He paid for stew and a pallet and a space near the hearth. He drank small beer that had aspirations and warmed his hands over the coals. When he slept, it was because his body bribed his mind into taking a brief holiday. He woke before dawn to the mule's patient breathing, and with it the old ache in his hip that had delivered him into mornings all his life like a coachman with a sense of humor. He dreamed once, just before dawn took hold. In the dream he was in a room without doors. It smelled like cloves and ink. On the table lay a golden hand and a child's doll with one eye. The doll blinked. "You always needed both of us?" the doll said in a voice he knew and detested, and the hand made a fist with a sound like a coin biting wood. When he set out again, frost rimed the edges of puddles and made them look like mirrors that had remembered to be humble. He rode with his hood up. Porridge's breath made a small cloud. He could pretend belonged to a dragon if he had been a different man. The lane unwound itself ahead, passing between hedges that had learned to forgive pigs, through meadows that remembered men with scythes instead of knives, and past a copse where someone had hung a scrap of red cloth on a branch like a warning or a later explanation. At a brook, he found a priest of the Seven hunkered on a rock, feet bare and blue with cold, beard full of last night's weather. The man's robe had known better days. He was rubbing a stone across another stone, the ancient liturgy of men trying to make two things that were already enough be more together. "You look like you're polishing the truth," Tyrion said. The priest snorted. "Truth doesn't polish. It takes a man's thumb clean off." He peered up at Tyrion's face with the frankness that beggars and saints share. "You have the look of someone who has learned that recently." Tyrion swung down with a care that did not want to be seen. He let Porridge drink and took a knee by the brook to splash his face. The water was clean and cold enough to improve his manners. "You walk the North Road?" the priest asked. "You don't have the skin for it." "I have a mule," Tyrion said. "She has enough skin for both of us." The priest smiled at that a little. "Men going north this year look in two directions at once. Half of them looking behind, half looking past the end of the road." He made a circle with his hands and then shrugged as if to apologize for the shape of it. "I'm walking the other way. Someone must ask questions of the men who are good at not listening." "What questions?" Tyrion asked. "The ones fathers answer with their hands," the priest said softly, "and the ones sons learn to answer with silence." It landed lightly and then heavily, like snow falling from a high bough. Tyrion reached into his cloak, took out a coin, and set it on the rock near the priest's knee. The priest looked at the coin as if it were the return of a friend who had borrowed an argument and brought it back thinner. "I'm not a good man," Tyrion said, "and I don't propose to become one for lack of imagination. But if you pass near a place where truth is rationed, near or far, tell them a smaller man walked north with a larger idea. Tell them he meant to rent it to the first honest buyer he found." The priest put the coin into his beard as if it were a nest. "What is the idea?" "That I am not my father," Tyrion said, and the saying of it did not change anything but felt useful anyway. The priest nodded. "The honest buyers are thin on the ground. Careful the idea doesn't go stale while you look." "The north is cold," Tyrion said. "Cold preserves." When he rose, his hip complained. Porridge moved her head in a slow arc to nudge his shoulder, then flicked a flea from her side with imperial disdain. He took the brook's crossing stones and found the balance he had always found on such things, understanding that the trick is to look past where your feet are going, not at them. By the time he reached the border of the riverlands proper, the ground had learned a new language: frozen thaw, thawed freeze. Trees kept their last leaves clenched like old men with stories no one would enjoy. He passed a burnt-out holdfast whose stones had cracked in the heat and then decided they were tired afterward. On a hill he found what had once been a gallows and was now an oddly tall gate for ghosts. He did not linger. Late that afternoon, a caravan caught up to him. It called itself a caravan because the word sustains people better than their goods do. 3 ox carts, a wagon with a patched canvas lid, a pair of plodding ponies tied nose to tail, a handful of men and women whose faces could have belonged to anyone. Tyrion drew his hood farther forward and tried to edge aside so they could pass without their curiosity needing to report for duty. The leader, an apple-cheeked woman missing the little finger on her left hand, rode a pony the color of weak tea and smiled at him with a confidence that suggested either poor judgment or a lot of practice. "Travel with us," she said. "Wolves don't like crowds, and men who pretend to be wolves like them even less." Tyrion hesitated. The caravan was safety of a kind. It was also attention of a different kind. But there was a tone in the woman's voice that made him think of a kitchen that doesn't mind when you steal bread. And he had always found kitchens friendly. He nodded. "I have a mule," he said, as if explaining the whole of his life. "We like mules," the woman said. "They forgive more than horses do. I'm called Helia." She gestured with her hand as if juggling names. "He's Perkin. That's Morel." The one who looks worried is always called Tom. Bren, Tyrion said, the name like a small cloak that kept the wind off his ears. Bren Hill. Good to meet you, Bren Hill, Helia said, and meant it in the solid way. They moved in a patient line, wagons creaking and the canvas lids sounding in the wind like old lungs. Tyrion fell in beside Morel, who walked with a spear that looked new and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to be new. Her hair was braided in a way that said she had started and then lost interest halfway through. She glanced down at him, then at the mule, and then straight ahead. Sometimes silence between strangers is a fence. Sometimes it's a blanket. This felt like the second kind. You walk for coin? Morel asked at last. I walk so the ground does not feel abandoned, Tyrion said. Occasionally coin takes pity on me. Fair, she said. We go north as far as we can be told to stop. Helia believes the road continues as long as someone says it does. Her faith has gotten us across 2 rivers and under one roof we didn't pay for. Wealth indeed, Tyrion said. What stops you? Winter, Morel said, the word carrying a weight that had nothing to do with weather. And men who like to rearrange other men's lives. They camped that night in the lee of a broken wall, a curl of old stone that made its own wind. Helia doled out stew made from promises and Perkin's hoard of carrots. One of the men produced a wineskin decent enough to make its owner look briefly noble. Stories were shared in fragments, with the names lifted out and the verbs softened. Tyrion listened, then told a story about a boy in Lannister who had tried to sell a fish back to the sea and nearly succeeded. He made it not about himself and not about anyone would recognize. The laughter was quiet but real, the laughter of people who have learned to conserve joy. Later, when most had fallen asleep and the coals were just a red rumor, Helia sat near him and spoke without looking at him. You don't wear your name well, she said. It looks like a borrowed coat. That's not judgment. Borrowed coats are warmer than no coats at all. I have more than one, Tyrion said. I put on whichever is least likely to be remembered in a week. Helia nodded. Good trick. Better trick is having somewhere to hang them up. That what you're going north to find? Something like it, he said. She drew her knees to her chest and hugged them. Word from the last town is that the Big Knife boys hold Winterfell, she said, messing the name on purpose as if taming it. Another word is that a man from far away sits inside a hall with smoke in his lungs and argues with the wind about who owns it. Another says the wall made a new lord out of a boy who used to prefer snow to people. People prefer clean stories. There aren't any. Clean stories are for men who like clean knives, Tyrion said. Helia scratched her ankle. Why north, Bren Hill? South is for forgetting. North is for remembering. Tyrion considered the simplest answer. Because my father is dead and I killed him, and that is a door that opens onto a hall with only one end. Instead, he tried a different truth. Because there's a girl in the north who knows my name, he said. And because there was once a boy there who learned to look at the world and not hate it for looking back. Helia made a small noise that agreed to let that be what it was. When she rose, she touched his sleeve with the kind of care she would give to a teacup that had belonged to her mother. Sleep, she said. We're safer when you do. He slept and dreamed of snow rising not like a tide but like a change in grammar. The way a sentence means one thing for a long time and then a word turns it toward a different light. In the morning, he helped Perkin lever a wheel out of a rut. His strength small but properly applied, and felt a satisfaction that had no politics in it. They moved through the riverlands as the week turned the pages of itself. Ruins became markers. They passed a field where spears sprouted like a second crop. They crossed a bridge rebuilt too quickly by men who did not love wood the way carpenters do. They shared fires with men who spoke of the phrase with the particular grammar of men who intended to see if justice tasted like blood. Tyrion kept his hood low and his voice middle. He remembered to make himself useful, to count the coin and the sacks, to suggest a different route around a flooded ford, to tell a story to a crying child that contained no wolves and ended in a pie. At a small town where geese haunted the lane like a gossip, they traded for wool cloaks that smelled of the woman who had made them and for flax to mend what would surely break. Tyrion coaxed a blacksmith's boy into reshoeing porridge by telling him about a mule who had kicked a king and earned a law to protect all mules as a result. The boy hammered with enthusiasm and at the end looked at porridge with respect he had not intended to feel. News came in ash and laughter. A man from the east said a queen had eaten a hart in a tent and made prophecy before she remembered to be a widow. A woman from the west said ships had new sails with old flags on them. A boy said he had seen a ghost with a flaming sword. A thin man with a beautiful voice said that the wall had voted and found a boy who had not asked to be found, and that the snow liked him regardless. This last rumor settled on Tyrion's shoulders like frost and did not melt. Jon Snow, the boy he had met at a high wall with a wild laugh and a bastard's patience. The boy who had stood beside him looking out into a wilderness that had seemed almost polite then. Tyrion had given him words that had felt like silver at the time and turned out to be tin. Now he had made a lord out of not wanting it. If the thin man could be trusted. Of course, the thin man could not be trusted. No one earning coin with their throat ever could. But the rumor had a slant to it he recognized, the slant of something people needed, lying in the correct direction enough to be useful. At night, when the caravan's breath made a little weather of its own under the canvas, Tyrion drew carefully from his purse and counted in silence. He had coin to last him until the snow turned truly rude. He had friends to endure a fortnight and then convert themselves into memories. He had a name that would last until someone with the wrong eyes said it out loud. He had a mule who had not yet taken a taste for him. He had not had much more, even when he had rooms full of things. One evening, far north of where wheat had given up, the caravan was joined by a woman in a cloak dyed the color of boiled nettles. She rode a horse too thin for the job and kept one hand tight on a small bag that made a sound like metal apologizing to itself. Helia examined her with a merchant's eye and waved her into the warmth without asking for coin. Later, by the fire, the woman opened her bag and brought out a stack of hammered plates and a set of nails wound with wire and said she could mend a roof if anyone had a roof needing it. She set to work on the wagons instead, her hands moving with the certainty of someone who had learned to make shelter out of argument. "You've not told your story," the woman said to Tyrion without looking at him, a nail held between her teeth. "I'm practicing a new habit," Tyrion said, "letting other men have theirs first." "Wise," the woman said, "but be careful. Men who don't tell their stories become characters in other men's versions. I have been that often enough to recognize the taste." She smiled and hammered the nail home. "What I've heard says you're going to the Wall. Not just the North. The Wall. It has a way of being a place and an idea," Tyrion said. "I find I am equipped to visit both." "Then you'll want to skirt the twins wide," she said in the same tone she'd used with the nail. "There's a cousin of the phrase they're fond of turning travelers into rope practice. Go through the pines behind the old quarry, and you'll miss him unless he's learned to climb without legs." "Good counsel," Tyrion said. "I am fond of men who lack legs for climbing." She regarded him over the top of the plank she was laying. In the firelight her face was nearly lovely, in the way a face can be lovely by deciding to be honest about its age. "I once worked a roof outside of Barrowton," she said conversationally. "Found a man hiding in the haystack who thought he could have me because he had a ring. Told him I had a hammer. And what did he do? Learned," she said, and made a third nail sing. The pines behind the old quarry proved themselves serious about their work. They swallowed sound and gave it back undecorated. The path there, calling it a path, was optimistic, threaded among roots and stones that had agreed to test men in different ways. Tyrion walked there with Porridge's rope looped around his wrist and felt an odd calm. Here, the world had the decency to be what it looked like. At midday, a snow began with the shamefaced quality of a man who comes late to his own marriage. The flakes fell large and soft. They collected on Porridge's ears and did not persuade her to care. Helia called a halt and the caravan clustered under the thickest boughs. Perkin brought out a copper pan and made a broth from the last of the bones and a handful of oats, and they ate it solemnly because it tasted like someone trying hard. Tyrion held his bowl in both hands and let the warmth into his fingers. Morel sat beside him and leaned against the same trunk. She smelled faintly of pine pitch and cold leather. "Did you ever have a brother?" she asked, apropos of nothing. I did, Tyrion said, his throat dry all at once. He was good at being a brother, but not at being a man. Opposite for mine, Morel said. Good at being a man, terrible at being a brother. She watched snow drift and avoid them. He took a knife for a man who had never learned to like him. Clever that. She did not sound bitter. She sounded as if she had been asked to put a story on the shelf and had done so. I will not compete with your grief, Tyrion said quietly. I would lose and we would both be poorer for it. She nodded once. We keep going. They did. The storm thought about being serious and then decided to be a rehearsal instead. When they emerged from the pines near twilight, the world had learned a new color between gray and white that allowed people to lose track of their own feet. The old quarry was a black wound in the land with an edge like an old promise. Beyond it, the lanes reassembled themselves out of habit. Helia set the pace and they made for a cluster of buildings that called itself a village because that is what it had been told. There, in a commons churned to pudding by boots, a man with a flensed smile and a tally stick tried to be the law. He looked at Helia's wagons and saw things divisible. He looked at Tyrion and saw an opportunity he had not considered before. He took a step toward Porridge with a smile that had convinced too many people to be calm. Hold, Helia said, in the tone she reserved for men who tripped over their own assumptions. These are my wagons. That's my mule. Law of the hamlet, the man said, tapping his stick against his palm. Tithe for protection. What protection would that be? Tyrion asked. Your stick? Your charming inclination. My men, the man said and gestured. 6 shapes in mismatched mail obliged, each with the sick, bright focus of men who have found an outlet for what would otherwise curdle inside them. Tyrion smiled gently. You must be very tired, he said. The man blinked, his stick stilled. What? Tired? Tyrion repeated, and put the mildness into his voice that had once made courtiers mistake his patience for permission. Exhausted with the work of all these choices, all-day decisions every day, who to menace, who to forget, who to pretend to save. I don't envy a profession like that. Poor sleep, I'd wager. Unhappy dreams. Food that never tastes of itself because your mouth spends its time on threats. The man hesitated, and Tyrion saw it land. It always did with certain men. They turned cruelty into a job and then discovered that jobs come with payroll and expectations and the possibility of failure. Dry rot in the roof of their selves. I can save you an evening, Tyrion said kindly. You're going to ask for half, we'll offer a fifth, you'll be offended. I'll call your bluff without saying the word, and we will all come to a number that insults no one and feeds more than one belly. Or you can collect a full tithe from the next caravan instead, which will not be 3 carts and a mule with a sense of humor but a merchant with guards, and he will make you explain yourself to a larger audience. It was a gamble, like all speech, but he had a feel for the currency in the man's eyes now. Fear, yes, but not of knives. Fear of having to talk to someone with better grammar. The man's stick tapped his thigh. He squinted at Tyrion as if into bad sunlight. A 7th, he said eventually. Coin or goods? Coin, Tyrion said, before Helia could bristle. 7 is a number people have decided to respect. They paid. It stung but less than steel would have. Helia's mouth worked around unsaid words, and later, when the wagons were drawn up near the stable and the mule's saddle was slack, she pulled Tyrion aside. I don't like paying men who eat standing up, she said. Neither do I, Tyrion said. But we are all choosing where to be poor. This was my choice. Helia looked at him for a long stretch, then nodded. You have the sort of stupid courage that keeps people alive, she said. For now. Not my first talent, but acceptable. They slept that night to the drip of thaw and the soft flurry of new snow. Tyrion dreamed of a table. Again the hand. Again the doll. This time, a third thing. A candle burned down to the stick, clutching its own light the way a beggar clutches a coin he cannot spend without losing it. In the morning, the caravan divided. Helia turned west toward a town with a tannery and a man who owed her his bad leg. Perkin followed with a promise to meet again in the spring. as if spring were a tavern where men had standing tables. Morel pointed her spear toward a village that was missing 4 roofs and had put a price on mended ones. She went with the Nettlecloak woman, their steps in rhythm already. Tyrion tightened Porridge's girth, fed her a carrot he had secreted away, and turned his head north. He was lighter now in a way that had nothing to do with coin. Alone again, the road became a confession he was not ready to make. He made it anyway, 1 foot before the other, every day because every day demanded its toll. He crossed into trees that had not cared who sat on what chair for 100 years. He ate cold bread and sometimes meat and thought about the economy of guilt. When he stopped at night, he sometimes spoke out loud to the mule, as much to hear another voice as to soothe himself with the illusion of company. "What would you do?" he asked once, as Porridge cropped frozen grass. "If you had been born in a stable with a father who believed every nail in your hoof should point outward?" Porridge flicked her tail and farted with the dignity of an empress. Tyrion accepted the rebuke and went to sleep. Past the last of the riverlands, the land began to climb into its own reflection. The sky grew pale with ambition.
Village Tind.
The people who remained had faces like careful bowls. Tyrion traded for white furs and a better hat. He gave a woman with frostbitten fingers a pair of gloves he had acquired, and she cried so quietly he almost missed it. He kept his coin under his shirt and his knife where he could reach it without thinking about reaching it. He found himself thinking, as the air struck his lungs with small whips, of Sansa Stark, the girl who had been his wife by decree, then by accident, then not at all by anything that mattered. How she had lifted her chin the way an apprentice swordsman lifts a blade. Not because it will save him, but because he has been told to do it, and doing it seems like something in a world of nothing. He wondered if she had learned to laugh out loud yet, not the tiny polite thing she had when court required it. He wondered if she hated him properly, because people deserved the correct hatreds. He wondered if she were north or east or somewhere that had never had a direction written on it. He wondered if he would deserve any greeting from her when he found a room that would admit them both without reminding them of who had owned the building. When he reached the neck, the world changed its skin. The air became damp and old, the ground unreliable, the trees dear with secrets. He did not expect to be allowed to understand it. He followed the causeways like a careful thought. Porridge learned quickly where to step. Once, a fog came down with the decisiveness of a king and stayed so long he began to suspect it was a new kind of wall. When it lifted, there were prints beside the causeway that looked like men's but were not quite. He chose not to be curious. He passed 2 men in tar-black cloaks with bows unstrung but hands ready. They had the gaze of people who have had to learn to love places that do not love them back. They said nothing. He lifted a hand. They watched him go as if he were a minute they could not trust. The gift lay beyond like a prayer someone had been afraid to say out loud. Fields gone to brush. Houses with roofs sagged like tired shoulders. A well where someone had scoured the stone with a brush and then walked away, perhaps satisfied with the appearance of cleanliness, perhaps exhausted by the effort. The cold took his ear that day and said it would return it in spring if he behaved. He believed it. He learned to keep his scarf up. He saw his first white raven near sunset, a shape against the gray, deliberate in its going. It unsettled him and then amused him to be unsettled by a bird. He had seen stranger things than weather's messenger. Still, he watched it until it disappeared, and then he walked faster because symbols are as good as orders when you have chosen to be a certain man. The wall did not arrive. It announced itself, first as a brightness where nothing had earned brightness, then as a line that resisted being horizon, then as a fact, growing larger with each blink. By the time he could see the crenellations like teeth, his breath made a banner before him and his legs had become a law he was following. He felt very small, but the sensation was a relief. He had been too large in other rooms lately, too large in a way that damaged things by displacing the air. Castle Black crouched at the wall's foot like a cat that had decided to forgive a chair for being where it was. The towers were honest about their age. Smoke rose from chimneys with a conviction events elsewhere lacked. Men moved along the yard with the concentration of those who have learned that distraction is a different word for injury. Tyrion paused on the last rise and considered the shape of what he was about to do. He could turn around, still. He could angle east, find a port, let the sea erase his footprints. He could go west and become a small farmer with a way with jokes and a mule who liked him more than most people would. He could follow any number of doors out of himself. He went forward because there was also the door that led in. "Ho there!" A voice called down from the gatehouse. The accent was northern in the way bread is bred. Fundamental. "What's your business?" "I bring a mule with secrets," Tyrion said, and drew back his hood. "And counsel that will either be of use or sellable for firewood." There was a mutter above. He heard a name said, then a second, then a laugh cut off halfway like a rope that had decided to stop being useful. The gates complained, then parted. A man with eyebrows like thatch and a scar across his chin stood there squinting at Tyrion, as if accounting for him to a book he did not like. "You've been here," the man said, after the kind of silence that warms itself by mocking your impatience. "Years ago," Tyrion said, "when the world was on its behavior and the dead stayed useful." "You're the Lannister," the man said. It wasn't entirely addressed to him. It was part of a conversation the man had with himself about how to call things what they were. "I am a man named Bren Hill," Tyrion said, "because habits maintain the roof in a storm. But under that name, I am also the Lannister who once pissed off the edge of your wall and recommended to your then Lord Commander that he keep certain stores of vinegar. That did it." The scar bent into something like a smile. "You gave Donal Noy the sort of bad advice that turned out good. He cursed you for it and kept the vinegar anyway. May his curses have warmed him in the end," Tyrion said. "They warmed other men," the man said, and then seemed to remember he had a duty. "You'll leave your mule with Hob. Your knife stays with me for an hour while you talk like a civilized man to a man who will decide if you are one." "That seems fair," Tyrion said, and surrendered the knife hilt first. The yard was alive with the particular energy of places that are always ready to be attacked by someone who does not understand yards. Men moved with purpose even when their purposes were small. Somewhere a hammer struck rhythm like a simple song. A boy of perhaps 13 ran past with a pot that slopped stew and did not spill because his balance had found him before his voice did. He glanced at Tyrion with aggressive curiosity and then gave his attention to the pot again because his life depended upon it. They put Tyrion in a room with a table that had scars enough to tell stories and a window that had given up on the idea of being glass. The man with the scar took his knife and set it on the table like a guest who had refused to hang his cloak. "Bowen Marsh will see you," he said, making an effort to sound bored and nearly succeeding. "It may be a while. He likes to be the last man to sit." "I have practice waiting," Tyrion said. He stood. He sat. He warmed his hands over the brazier and was grateful for whoever had decided to waste fuel on him. He went to the window and looked out and saw the wall pressed against the sky, a piece of impossible furniture left by giants who had moved house without telling anyone. He wondered what Benjen Stark would have made of this day, then left the thought alone. The dead deserve their priva. Sigh. When Bowen Marsh entered, he did it with the careful steps of a man who does not like to be surprised by his own feet. He was middle everything, height, age, opinions, except for the carefulness which was key-shaped and fit a lot of locks. He looked at Tyrion and saw at once both what he was and what he had decided to be for now. He sat, and the chair made a small statement under him about burden and endurance. "We have little to sell and purchase nothing save wood, food, and men who mean what they say," Bowen Marsh said, skipping greeting because greeting implies choices he did not enjoy. "Who are you under your hood?" "A Lannister," Tyrion said, "because there was no use selling rope at a knot shop. One who once stood on your wall and learned to be small in a way I recommend. One who has lost his father in a manner that will make dinner conversations interesting in any afterlife that allows them." Marsh's lip tightened and then relaxed, a movement so small it might have been shivering. "We've heard things," he said. "The river carries more than fish." "It does," Tyrion said. "I've come north in the sort of humor that prefers problems with clear edges to those that wear perfume. I wish to speak to your Lord Commander, if he is the man I am told he is." Bowen Marsh's face adjusted in a way that could have meant disapproval or could have simply been his content. "He is at the other end of the yard," he said, teaching boys to consider which end of a spear to introduce to a guest. "He will come when he has finished telling them something obvious. He likes to start at the beginning." "That's a kindness to beginnings," Tyrion said. Marsh looked down at the knife on the table. His fingers moved to it and then away as if remembering a vow made to his own caution. "What do you want?" he asked. "Employment," Tyrion said. "Or forgiveness, failing that. Or consequence. Or, failing all of those, a warm bed for a week and soup that tastes like the memory of food. But in truth, I want something larger than any of that. I want to make myself into a man who moved in the right direction when his father died." "North is the right direction?" Marsh asked. "Compared to south," Tyrion said, "which currently is a room with knives behind the curtains." Marsh made a sound that could have been a laugh if one were charitable. He opened his mouth, then closed it as the door swung inward and admitted a draft and a young man with black hair that had decided it did not care what anyone thought. He had not been handsome as a boy. He had been a promise of handsome if he could learn to keep his mouth from making apologies for his eyes. Now, he had done that work. He had a face like when snow stops kidding. His clothing was simple in the way that comes after you have tried on better and decided their cost was confusion. He saw Tyrion and a dozen expressions moved through him like birds changing formation. Surprise, then an old warmth that made a line across his eyes, then a steadiness that had done its exercises every morning all winter. Jon Snow began, then paused with the skill of someone who has learned the price of names. "You." "Me," Tyrion said. He did not stand because standing would have turned the moment into a play and the room deserved better. "I would have sent a raven, but they are notoriously suspicious of people like me." Jon crossed the room in 3 steps and stopped because his body told him that stopping here was better than going all the way to something he could not afford. He looked at Bowen Marsh as if to check if the man needed a translation. Marsh looked back with the expression of a man who had already written this scene into the ledger days ago and was now making sure the numbers behaved. "You came north," Jon said. It was not a question. It had the tone people use when they need to hear a fact again to accept it. "When every other road was down. I was poorly suited for most of them," Tyrion said. "I have a mule. She likes practical difficulties. I have ideas. They like walls." Jon Snow's mouth did a thing it had done when he was a boy, when he did not know what to do with a feeling and tried smiling at it as if it were a stranger on a road he might share bread with. "Past." He pulled out the chair opposite Tyrion and sat. He placed his hands on the table, palms down, in a posture that had been taught to him by someone stern about chairs being much like thrones if you treated them badly. "I am Lord Commander here," he said, and it cost him something to make it fact rather than costume. "Names aside, that is the thing I am most often called." "Respectfully," Tyrion said. "You look like a boy who likes the snow still but has learned to make people stand in it with him." Jon's eyes relaxed. "Perhaps." He flicked his glance to Bowen Marsh, who arranged his face to suggest that he would not be necessary until needed and that he understood this was a luxury. He left, and the door closed, and Tyrion felt the room shrink in a way that made conversation easier. "You've killed your father," Jon said. There was no judgment and no pity in it, only the clean acknowledgement of a wound. "So I've heard. I won't pretend to know the circumstances, and if you want absolution, you've come to the wrong place." "I would be suspicious of absolution if it were offered to me," Tyrion said. "I want something better. I want work." "Work," Jon repeated. "You have enemies in 2 directions," Tyrion said. "A wall above you and one below you. You have men who are loyal to the idea of this place but have gotten into the habit of disagreeing about whether ideas feed you when the wind is from the east. You have neighbors who will decide you are either in their way or almost useful. You have a winter that will treat every human plan as a novel it has decided to rewrite. I have a head that has been applied to problems of the sort that make men sigh. If I may speak as if we were at a table in a city where tables have wine on them, I can help you weigh which enemies can be fed and which must be starved. Jon listened in the way that is a kind of prayer. Tyrion had always liked that about him. It made him feel dangerous and necessary in equal measure. "You would be with the Watch?" Jon asked. "I would be with you," Tyrion said, "which may be the same thing for a month or for a year or until some larger matter intrudes." He lifted his hands. "I am, despite appearances and preferences, tied to names that will not stop following me. It may be that the thing I owe the North will not be paid entirely in the currency of your yard. It may be that I will one day have to walk to a hall with wolves carved into its stone and make an argument to someone who has every right to throw me out a window. But for now, here, if you can use a man who knows how to count and has learned to spend guilt on strangers when necessary, I am yours at a rate you will find handsome." Jon sat with it. In the silence, the coals in the brazier cracked. Outside, a boy shouted at someone not to be stupid with a spear, and someone else laughed and was then corrected by pain. Jon looked at Tyrion until he had found the thread he needed. "Why us?" he asked, and the us bore more than the Watch's weight. "Why the Starks?" Tyrion had expected the question. He had not expected it to be asked so gently. He had prepared an answer like a stunt, full of cleverness and bitter wine. He did not use it, because when the world was busy making me small in the wrong ways, he said. "Your family was the only one that looked at me and decided to be exactly as tall as they were. Your brother laughed with me, not at me. Your sister looked at me as if I were a fact, not a mistake. Even your father, the one who went missing, had the dignity to have no opinion of me at all." He spread his hands. "And because I was a husband to your sister in name and a failure in every way besides. If there was a debt to begin with, I did not pay it then. I would like to start paying now." Jon's face, which had learned to be better than honest by being quiet when it wanted to speak, changed very slowly. "If you came for her," he said, as if trying to sound angry to see if the sound would fit. "She is not here." "I did not come to take her," Tyrion said softly. "I came to stand where she might be able to see me standing if she chooses to look someday." Jon's mouth turned at one corner as if surprised by itself. He reached across the table and touched Tyrion's knife without moving it. "There is room here for men who know how to count," he said, "and a need for men who know how to be counted. I am not a good lord. I am a man who knows 4 ways to say no and 2 ways to say yes. I find I need people who can tell me which one to use before I break something." "Then I am your man," Tyrion said, and felt something in him sit down for the first time in weeks. Jon stood because he had to, because rooms demand rituals. "Welcome to Castle Black, Bren Hill," he said deliberately, giving the borrowed coat the respect it needed to keep the wind off. "We will begin by looking at numbers I do not trust and at men I trust too much. After that, we will see where the road rises." Tyrion rose. He felt the old ache in his hip as a teacher, not an enemy. Jon opened the door and let in the cold and the sound of practice. They stepped out into a yard that was always a heartbeat from being a battlefield and sometimes forgot not to be. Snow began to fall with more confidence now, as if it had finished its letter and decided on a signature. Tyrion lifted his face to it and let the flakes find him. It was possible, he thought, that he had found a room he could stand in that did not ask him to pretend to be taller or shorter than he was. The days that followed did not make themselves into a story quickly, which was a mercy. He rose early to numbers that had been kept by men who understood how to feed a garrison on theory and a prayer. He sat with Hob the cook and learned how many mouths could be bought off with stew thick enough to stand a spoon in. He walked the outer palisades with a man called Yarwick, who had a carpenter's patience for men and wood and whose eyebrows did the talking when he was tired. He listened to Dolorous Ed complain about life as if complaining were his profession and life his hobby, and found in it a peculiar energy that turned men back to their tasks out of spite. He watched boys becoming men because the cold made them decide between the two and did not give them time to mourn childhood. He met a woman from a village in the Gift who bartered candles for meat and spoke to him as if he were another candle, something that would last as long as the room needed it to, and then stoop and die with dignity. He learned names and did not use them because he understood their cost. He let his true name sit in his chest like an old coin he would spend only when it would purchase the one thing he wanted. He and Jon spoke late into nights that had lost track of when they were supposed to end. They built maps out of words. They argued about how to spend men as if men were coins and coin were water. They taught each other patience by making mistakes they could afford. Tyrion told Jon about Southern lords and the specific way wine makes cowards brave and brave men stupid. Jon told Tyrion about wind and how it carries news if you are willing to hear it as sound rather than language. They spoke once and only once about fathers. They did not weep. They swallowed and let the cold dry their eyes. Letters came on ravens, on men's boots, on women's tongues, on the backs of rumors that would not stop multiplying. Word of a man in the north with a candle he could not teach to go out. News of a Bolton with a smile on the wrong part of his face. Syllables about a girl with hair like chestnut who was seen and then had not been seen again. Hints of Banner's shaking themselves out in the Vale like old bedclothes shaken out of windows. Names that people tried on like winter coats to see if they would fit. Tyrion sorted them with a merchant's finger and a gambler's eye and began to understand which words wanted to be true and which did not. He wrote a letter he did not send. He wrote another and burned it. He said Sansa's name once in the yard under his breath and felt foolish for the gesture, as if he had tossed bread to a wind. He stopped himself from doing it again. Want was a currency. He had elected, for once, to invest rather than to buy. He had a ledger in his mind now. Debits of anger, credits of patience, and an account labeled with his father's name where he put acts he did not want to understand. One afternoon, when the light had decided to be thin and bitter and therefore northern, a man arrived from the south wrapped in fur and consequence. He had the signs of a messenger who had been paid to look expensive, and the exhaustion of a man who had learned that money does not make mud less deep. Jon met him in the yard, and the man bowed just short of mockery. He carried a letter. It smelled of wax and arrogance. Jon read it, his face doing its quiet work, and then handed it to Tyrion without ceremony. It was from a lord in the Vale whose words were forked like a snake's tongue, and whose signature looked like he had forgotten his own name halfway through and decided to make a drawing instead. The letter spoke of a ward, spoke of order. It made a suggestion that, taken on its face, was nothing and, understood correctly, was a piece moved on a board that extended farther than either of them had the right to consider. Tyrion read it once and saw 3 consequences. He read it twice and saw 2 more. He read it a 3rd time and saw, behind the words, a girl who had learned to stand inside herself and make of her ribs a house. He folded the letter and handed it back. "Well," he said, "here we are." "Here we are," Jon agreed, and looked upward as if the wall might have an opinion. Tyrion felt his face, which had forgotten its tricks, attempt to smile and decide against it. He had no illusions about what came next. Plans would need making that would offend men who liked their plans bloody. Letters would be written with the patience of snow. Alliances would be proposed that would taste like ashes to men with old oaths on their tongues. He would have to walk south whether or not the word north was stitched across his chest. He would have to stand in rooms that insisted on measuring him and insist on being measured by a different yardstick. But for the moment, there was stew to taste and a barrel to inventory and a boy to remind that the right end of a spear was less sharp to the hand. There was a mule to brush and an old priest's coin to remember and set aside, ready for when the truth needed polishing that would take a thumb with it. He walked out into the yard. Snow climbed into his beard. Dolorous Ed was arguing with a pot and losing, and Tyrion found this reassuring. Jon stood with his back to the biggest thing in the world and looked smaller for it and stronger. Men moved with purpose. The air had that clean taste that makes a man admit things to himself and no one else. Tyrion Lannister, under his borrowed coat, kept moving forward. The north was a long conversation, and he had time.